Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Sea Stories. We've made it all the way to season 4, and nobody's gotten hurt yet. That's a good start in the first place. It's a beautiful September day, 2025, and I am joined by one of the greats. I'm joined by Tania Aebi, who's here all the way from the wilds of Vermont. And you may remember Tania took off in 1985, a trip around the world at age 18. And welcome aboard, Tania. It's nice to see you. Tania, I'm going to kick it over to you. And many times I've been asked to just stop talking. So I'm going to let it run on your side until we get to our first commercial break.
All right, then. Yeah, because the title of the thing is 40 Years of Sailing, and I've got to talk about that in the next 40 minutes. So I'm going to talk really fast. Um, I am just going to tell some stories here. I've heard that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you're an expert, and I've put well more than 10,000 hours into the sailing thing, and I still don't think I'm an expert, but I've learned a lot along the way. I'm not going to teach anything other than that, like I always said when I started, if I could do it, and if you want to do it, you can do it too. Oh, did that screen just show up here? Interesting. Anyway, I am. Should I just launch right into the slides? We'll just get going with that, right?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Yeah.
Let's just do it your way.
We'll just go straight to the pictures. There we go. Oh, wow. That went easy. Can you see it?
Let's do a screen share.
Oh, right. We just practiced that a whole bunch of times.
It's all good. Don't you worry about it.
Here we go. And then
we got you. Thank you.
Slideshow. Here we go. There. Okay. 40 years a sailor. So yeah. So it's actually more than 40 years ago that I got into sailing. I was 16 and my dad bought a boat and I ended up sailing from England to New York with him via Spain, Portugal, Morocco, the Canary Islands, the Caribbean, back up, flat calms, big storms. I had finished an alternative high school, and he came up with this plan to give me something to do with my future. He saw that I had fallen in love with the whole sailing thing, and so that's our sailing trip. That's when we were crossing the Atlantic. He came up with the idea, which kind of set my life on the course it's taken. I didn't say yes right away to that trip, but I did by the time I got back to New York. I knew I didn't have anything better to do. I knew that this was probably the chance of a lifetime. There was a glimmer of understanding, even at the age of 17, that I owed it to myself to try this. When I first started, I thought, oh, I can always quit if it's not going to work out. But that turned out to be a lot easier said than done. Quitting wasn't really part of the story. Anyway, so this was on the trip with my father on arrival 38, which was 12 feet longer than what I ended up with on my boat. And one of the first things I learned about on Varuna was what a huge difference 12 feet in length will make. My dad's boat was really nice and big compared to Varuna, but she was a good boat. I found her at the same time as I was going back to Switzerland to visit my mother. My parents had had a long divorce and custody battle, and this was actually one of the few things that she agreed with. She thought this was a fantastic opportunity for me. She even wanted to come. She was sick, she had cancer, and she knew that her days were numbered, and we owe it to ourselves to get to do what we can when we can. So that was kind of behind everything with me, was my mother, and also being a big supporter of this, not just my father. So the boat was built in Toronto, Contessa 26, and this picture was taken when we launched her. Right after it was taken, I took the cork from the champagne bottle, we christened her, and gave it to my dad. He threw it in the lake. The engine wouldn't start. 10 minutes later, the guys from the factory were there, and it turned out we forgot to turn on the batteries, which was the easiest solution to my engine problems. For 2.5 years, I was battling this engine, and I just told Duncan that I've had ever since engine-related PTSD. I don't even want, he has a 26-year-old car. I can't do that. I don't want to break down. This taught me about not wanting to ever break down. But by the time I finished this trip, I do know how to troubleshoot diesel engines pretty well. That there was a lot of learning with that. This was the inside of the Contessa. She supposedly slept four. That never happened. But up forward where I'm sitting there ended up just being storage for sales and books and food and so on. After that was the head, and then after that was the galley, which was a two-burner kerosene stove, and then a sink with uh, attached to 20 gallons of water and an ice box. This was the 90s. It was the end of the era and the end of an era. At that time, there was only the sat nav. There were no GPSs, and I left with a rudimentary grasp on celestial navigation. I was pretty good with the coastal, having learned that on my dad's boat, but I figured I'd learn how to do the celestial navigation once I was underway, meeting other people, talking to them, and figuring it out when I needed to. And this was standing headroom on the boat, which wasn't really headroom. I could stand if the hatch was open in the middle there. So in the months leading up to the trip, there was very little I could do to prepare. I read books, I took the navigation courses, but I knew that my real testing and learning would happen once I was underway. There was no way I could know what this was going to be like until I was there on the boat in the middle of the ocean, figuring out one day at a time, 1 mile at a time. I got the table here that my feet are on. I got rid of that eventually and just made a bunk. I put a plank between the two berths and came in and out of the companionway onto my bed. And Varuna was basically a bed with a little galley next to it. So while I was getting the boat ready, we brought her down in May of 1985, and I had a couple of weeks to get everything on board until leaving. And while I was doing that, my dad was telling everybody and their grandmother about what I was going to do. So this is the day I left, with everyone coming and asking me why I was going to do this. That was the big question, why? And I was just like, why not? That was my answer. I didn't have a better idea. I was just going to go see. I was 18. It's a little different when you're 18 than from when you're more than 18. I just said, why not? And I guess that wasn't really what people wanted to hear, but I had to go figure out why. I had to get out there. So the first part of the trip was from New York out to Bermuda, across the Gulf Stream to Bermuda, down to St. Thomas, across the Caribbean to Panama, through the canal, across to the Galapagos Islands. The longest projected passage of the entire trip, which was the 3,000 miles to the Marquesas, and then on down to Tahiti. When I left New York, and this is something that I've realized in the years since, is that a really what was key to my being able to do this was, as I didn't really think of it as an entire circumnavigation. Every time I left the harbor, when I left New York, I was going to Bermuda. I wasn't going around the world. I just had to get to Bermuda. And Bermuda, I had to get to St. Thomas. And breaking it down into these manageable legs was a lot easier to wrap a young head around than thinking of a huge endeavor. One day, 1 mile at a time. I'd have on my charts, the days would be broken down into 2 hour, whatever, blocks of time that I could cross off. It was literally hours at a time. But the day I left New York, rainy, miserable, the engine conked out as I was putting distance between me and Manhattan, and I went out to Sandy Hook, figured out the engine problem, left a couple days later, and the first trip to Bermuda was 12 days, and that's typically, a 5-day trip for people. So while I was out there, I had storms, flat calms. I was figuring out how to work the boat. The self-steering gear was my best friend. That thing did all the steering for me. In this picture, actually, there's a little auto helm operating, but that died from lack of use because the engine just hardly ever worked. But out there, I figured out how the boat worked and how I worked with her and what it felt like to be in the middle of the ocean. And that trip to Bermuda was so important because that's when I realized I actually loved being there. I loved being the only person on the whole planet that knew where I was at any given moment and being kind of like the master of my own little universe. And at the same time, a speck of nothingness, which was something that I kept coming back to over and over again. That simultaneous feeling is not something you can have many places on the planet. In the middle of the ocean alone, I was everything and nothing at exactly the same time. Kind of humbling. And, kind of makes you feel good sometimes too. Anyway, I got to Bermuda. After all of those problems, wrote my first article for Cruising World, who said they'd publish anything I wrote underway. And I talked about I had trouble with navigation, how the boat had leaks, whatever. There were a whole bunch of things that happened. I wrote about it and found out for the first time that people might have opinions about what I was doing, because I got letters forwarded to me months later. This was when people still wrote letters, and I got packages of mail sent to me of a lot of people thinking this was a really cool thing, bravo. But there were several that said I was a waste of taxpayers' money. My dad was a maniac for sending me out there, and just a bunch of negative letters, which I've thought so many times recently. I would have never been able to do this if there'd been an online world at the time where people could just so easily say at that time they had to actually write it down and put a stamp, find an address. And so it wasn't as many as I probably could have gotten. But even those few letters, they actually were the ones that were responsible for keeping me going. Every time I felt like I was screwing up or I was going to mess, or was thinking of quitting, I think, boy, those people will be right. If I don't make it, they're right. Can't let that happen. So the next passage was on to St. Thomas, where my cat Dingy joined me, and he made it around more than halfway around the world. And St. Thomas I only found because I saw a ship the night before I thought I was going to arrive. If I hadn't called them, I would have hit Puerto Rico. I was able to alter course on time. And again, Panama, I only found Panama because I just lined up, followed the shipping in. And then outside of Panama, I found the Galapagos. This was the day I thought I was crossing the equator. I set up the camera to take a picture of the little celebration and saw a fishing boat that night and found out I was actually still 50 miles north of the equator. So I was having problems with my navigation, and definitely know that it was pride that got in the way of figuring out the solution. There was just no way I could walk up to some impressed sailor on a dock and say, I don't know how to navigate. Can you help me? I was going to figure it out, just like all the books said. It was supposed to be easy. But then I had made good enough friends with some other guys on a boat in the Galapagos that I met up with again. And we sat down, and it turned out that I did know what I was doing as far as the calculations and the tables went. It was my sextant that was wrong. It was plastic. It wasn't giving me the good readings. And I had a perfectly good sextant in a locker that I took out and ended up, I knew how to navigate. By the time I got that good old sextant out, my positions were perfect, and that became a highlight of the trip. Was every day, once a day, I could figure out exactly where I was in all that water. The next 24 hours was all just dead reckoning, but at one time, once a day, I knew exactly where I was, and that was something to look forward to see how far I'd gone. Huge difference from the GPS, where you know where you are every second now, but. Anyway, not that I don't love having a GPS now. It's really nice, but it was also pretty cool to be able to use the sun, the moon, the stars, everything out there in nature and the world around me to figure out where I was in all that water. Something's lost with not there's a connection that's lost when you don't do that. But anyway.
Tania, let's take a little break here for a moment, and we will be right back with Tania Aebi. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that. Here we go.
This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net.
And you can come see us at Schooner Sultana's downrigging this at the end of October, early November. Well, welcome back, everyone. And we are talking to Tania Aebi. Take it away, Tania.
All right. So this is crossing in the South Pacific, the 3,000-mile passage, where I was doing all the navigating perfectly, knowing exactly how many miles I was making every 24-hour period. Sunrises, sunsets, dolphins, whales. I celebrated my 19th birthday out there. I had a really beautiful passage. That's kind of thought that the rest of the trip was going to be like that, that I was in the trade winds. Not quite, but that was perhaps the most beautiful passage I've ever had. Um, and making landfall in the Marquesas was pretty amazing too. This is Fatu Hiva. And this was the stuff that I had been dreaming about, that I imagined would be my life for the next couple of years before I left. And it was beautiful. But it was in the Marquesas also that I found out that my mom had taken a turn for the worse. So I made a beeline for Tahiti and went back to New York for 2 weeks. And that was the last time I was going to see her. By the time, and it was very hard to go back to Tahiti. You know, when you look back over a life and you think about the low points, this would have been one of them, was to leave and go back. And a couple weeks later, she passed away, and that was a huge turning point. And it was like, now I had to get on with things. This was this. She probably lasted longer just being there for me as I went than she would have otherwise. So I had to keep going, which meant also getting another cat. This little guy, Mimi, little girl, she came to join the black and white cat, which, there you go, is a 19-year-old decision to take 2 cats on a 26-foot boat. Bad idea. Here's the sextant. This picture was just taken at some point when I was cleaning out the boat. My cockpit is a mess in this picture. I used to be, every time I landed somewhere, I would clean out everything. This picture was obviously taken when I did that, so it was a mess. Usually it was very tidy, my cockpit. But anyway, the sextant that always had to get adjusted, whatever the word is. Anyway, I left Tahiti and calibrated. I left Tahiti, folded up the dinghy, and went 20 miles to the next door island of Moorea and spent a couple weeks saying goodbye there before leaving Moorea for the American Samoa. Had a gnarly trip there, lice, depressions, 2 cats never using their kitty litter. But I got to American Samoa and then Western Samoa. And again, one day, 1 mile at a time. So this is where I got the call about my mom, went down to Tahiti, American Samoa, Western Samoa, Wallis and Futuna Islands, across to Vanuatu, Coral Sea to Australia, up the Great Barrier Reef to Thursday Island, and on. Next part of the trip, I got to Wallis and Futuna Island. I just selected some pictures for this because I can't show everything. But Wallis and Futuna were other highlights in the South Pacific. Because I made friends with another French boat, I stopped in these islands, which I would have passed otherwise, because I gravitated toward places where I'd see more boats and have facilities. Anyway, I saw a side of the South Pacific I wouldn't have seen otherwise. This island, they were like 1,000 people on it, and they were all building a massive cathedral, and we're hoping to have the Pope come for opening ceremonies. And this Wallis Island, they were actually still sailing these boats around, fishing in the lagoon every day. And everywhere else I went, they had Yamahas, whatever, outboard engines. This place, they were still sailing them. On to Vanuatu, which is where I met Olivier, who ended up being my husband and the father of my kids. And people always asked, how'd you meet him? I anchored next to him. He said hi, I said hi, and that's how we met. But it kind of changed the trip, because now Olivier was in the picture. We left Vanuatu. Oh, the dinghy, the black and white cat, he died here. He had to be put down. He had a kidney thing that male cats will get. And I got the little guy in this picture, Tarzun, who outlived my marriage. He was 21 when he died. He made it all the way around. And this picture I stick in here because that's kind of what I had to find outside of Australia to find my way in through the Great Barrier Reef. So this was the big navigation test, was to find a tiny little lighthouse sticking up out of the water with no visual landmarks other than that, to find my way in through the Barrier Reef. But after I found the lighthouse, another storm came through. I spent 3 days outside of the Barrier Reef, swearing the only way I was going to get home was on a 747. If there's a low point in the trip, this is it. This is where I came as close to thinking about quitting as I did. But like I said, quitting was a lot harder than to keep going. And Olivier decided, instead of stopping in Australia as he'd originally planned, he'd also sail back to Europe. So I knew I'd meet up with him in different harbors along the way, and that was a game changer. So we set sail up the Great Barrier Reef to Thursday Island and on across to Bali, Christmas Island, back north across the equator to Sri Lanka, and across the Arabian Sea to Djibouti. And that's the next part of the trip. It's really easy to say zip, 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 and then to spend all that time out there. So this is one of the only fish I ever caught on the Great Barrier Reef. Luckily got a picture. Found out I caught it in an underwater national park afterwards, which is the only reason why I caught this thing. I tried, but not easy. My 20th birthday last night on the Great Barrier Reef, and I always said my 19th and 19th birthday in the South Pacific, 20th on the Great Barrier Reef, and 21st in the middle of the North Atlantic will never be forgotten. I mean, that's part of my story, a big one. I've had many birthdays since. I don't remember any of them, but those guys I'll never forget. Those three. There was not a lot of wind between Thursday Island and Bali. Olivier and I, we didn't try to stay together, but 3 days out when the wind died, I actually saw his sail on the horizon and motored over there. We tied the boats with a long line together and drifted for a couple days. At the end of the second day, Australian Coast Guard cutter came up to us and threw us ice and ice cream and tootled off. And I don't know, years later, I got a fax from the captain of this boat who said he read the book, remembered this day vividly, and how much he wished he could be on a little boat sailing across oceans. So I wrote right back to him and said I could still remember how much I wished I were him on his big, nice boat with freezers and steaks for dinner. This is the first bird that Tarzoon met. If you can see in this picture, I have a harness on him because I was scared once he got up on a solar panel, he'd go winging off the back of the boat. But this bird pecked him in the face right after I took this picture. I can't not include this picture in any slideshow ever. Right after the bird pecked him, he went down below and wouldn't come back out until the bird left. Christmas Island. Olivier and I managed to stay together up until Bali, but then we stopped trying because it was hard. His boat didn't have a VHF even, or he had kerosene lanterns for navigation lights, so it was hard to try and stay together. We had to do watches and not getting enough sleep. And anyway, Christmas Island, I arrived at the beginning of hurricane season, so it was kind of important. It felt important to get out of there and back north of the equator as fast as possible. The doldrums, flat calms. This is just a stock picture from somewhere without wind, but the flat calms were almost more frustrating than too much wind. Just on the way between Christmas Island and Sri Lanka, my mother had plied me with all the classics before I left, and this is the trip where I ended up reading a bunch of them. I ran out of all my pulpy books. Christmas, Sri Lanka, I'm a tea drinker, so I got to see the tea plantations there. My dad came. He was the first time I saw him since Bermuda, so we had a lot of stories to tell. He'd had his adventures, I had mine. We visited Sri Lanka, which is the seat of Buddhism, so little Buddhas, big Buddhas. This is inside the Buddha. Sri Lanka was a very cool place. You know what? Everywhere I went, people have asked me all these years what was my favorite place, and that's always been one of the hardest questions to answer because every place was special for whatever reason. I also hauled Varuna out while there just to make sure everything was okay under there and to put another coat of anti-fouling on before the last few legs home. It was kind of like the last, well, here's the map, the chart from Sri Lanka. It was across the Arabian Sea to Djibouti, up, stopping in Sudan, Egypt, up through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean again, stopping in Crete, Malta, Spain, Gibraltar, back across the North Atlantic, home to New York. So the Arabian Sea, the passage from Sri Lanka over there, that was kind of my last nice, like, regular wind. It was the northeast monsoon, and I had nice wind pushing me toward Djibouti and beautiful sunrises and sunsets. Olivia and I stayed together for a couple days before stopping. This was another 28-day trip. I've not been mentioning, but these passages were long. They were like 30 days, 28 days, 26 days. And coming into Djibouti, it was coming from Sri Lanka and the jungles of a tropical island to North African desert. There was a lot of culture shock involved with landing in all these completely different places from the ocean void. Like I'd be completely wiped, like a disc or your phone. I'd go in the ocean and I'd just be stripped of all, attachment to civilization. And then I'd land in these completely different places and be like bombarded by sights, sounds, smells, everything. It was cool. It was just another experience. It was part of the experience. In Djibouti, we had this guy in the picture, Len, he was another single-hander, and we thought that we would sail the 3 boats together up the Red Sea in a flotilla, because people were doing that there because of pirates and because of shipping. Everybody just thought safety in numbers was a good idea. But this is the entrance to the Red Sea, the Straits of Bab el Mandab. And right before we got there, Len, the Englishman's boat, it lagged behind. And Olivier and I kept on going. And we lost each other this night, too, the first night out. The wind was howling as we came in through the entrance to the Red Sea, the Straits of Bab el Mandab. And we got through there, and I lost him and got to Port Sudan, where I found out that Len, when we thought he was just behind doing sail changes, actually his boom had jibed and killed him. And that was my first encounter where 1 minute everything was fine and the next minute was all over. And it made me start feeling my own mortality a lot more strongly. Like if I wasn't going to make it, the closer I got to home, the closer I was getting to death, right? Because if I'm not going to make it, if I'm not going to survive this trip, it's gonna the end's happening soon. And I'm a little nuts thinking about that too much. But on land things were okay. In Sudan, I visited with I had another bunch of great experiences in Sudan. This is the shoe shine guys, taught me a bunch of Arabic. I taught them English. Every day we stopped there, and they would just want to visit and hear stories. And that was another thing about this trip, was here I am, this single-handed young female arriving in all these places. People were curious and they always wanted to hear my stories. And in return, I'd get their stories. And I love that. And that's been true for all the years since. The story, writing the book about this trip, has had people write to me with their stories. And I've been so grateful for that for decades now, being able to have access to other people and their stories. I've loved that very much. It started there. Just my story inspired the return of stories. But anyway, continuing with this story was the Red Sea, which was very hard sailing. It was headwinds the whole way up. Sail changes constantly. Olivia and I managed to stay within sight of each other, dodging the shipping, tacking before we got to the reefs, and my sail was constantly ripping. This is the patchwork job. I spent a lot of time out there with the needle and thread and rubber cement and spare sailcloth, and praying to that thing to keep it going. I had telegrammed my dad in Port Sudan asking if there was any way to get a sail to me in Egypt. That would be great, because this thing wasn't going to make it. And he did come up. He brought me a new sail in Port Sudan. This is the last in Port Said, and this is the last night on the Red Sea, and it was beautiful, which was a hard sail up, but it was such a different world, and it was so cool too. This is the most amazing underwater life I've ever seen. I don't know if it's still like that, but back then it was like National Geographic pictures underwater there. The Suez Canal, it's a 2-day trip, went through. You have to have a pilot. My dad had been on Olivier's boat, and he left at the midway point to get back in time for my brother's high school graduation. And then his words were ringing in my ears that I needed to hurry up so that I'd get back across the North Atlantic before the winter and the storm season. And so we left Port Suez on a Friday, which I did that once before, and things happened that I blamed on having left on a Friday. I left on a Friday again, this time because Olivier had been making so much fun of me, because that's an Anglo superstition, not French. But that night I got hit by a ship, and this isn't the actual ship. And Varuna didn't make contact with the ship, but because she was so small, she got glanced alongside the boat as it passed in front of us. But something did snag the forestay and snap it. And I had tied down another halyard to the bow roller, because that halyard, that stay had started fraying anyway. I was fine. I was able to make the repair and get to Malta, but it really scared the living daylights out of me. It's like, I always assumed that my chances of being in exactly the same spot as another boat and all that water were slim, but not anymore. Now I realized that could happen. And that happens also in the Mediterranean, which is chock full of shipping and no really designated shipping lanes. Anyway, made it to Malta, where I fixed up Varuna, changed the forestay, and did a bunch of other little jobs to her, because it was 4,000 miles back to New York. So I did what I could to make her as shipshape as possible for that. And Olivier was stopping here. This was one of our last little family pictures, me with the cat, him with all his shells. Oh, one of the cats jumped ship in Egypt. She went on another boat with a cook. So I only had Tarzoon finishing the trip with me. So the rest of the Mediterranean was a challenge. There's no regular winds there, so it was constant sail changes, no sleeping, worrying about shipping. Got into a storm right south of the Balearic Islands, got knocked down, thought I was sinking, radioed a ship. Not radio, turned on the EPIRB because I saw a ship, but they kept on going. So I turned off the EPIRB, bailed out with a bucket. And I mean, this is the story I always tell because it was my big knockdown story. But lightning, thunder. Oh, no thunder, lightning and wind, no rain or thunder. Anyway, the boat got knocked down, huge mess. I made it to Gibraltar and cleaned out the boat. Everything had gotten soaking wet. I just needed to clean out everything. And I also unloaded a whole bunch of stuff for the last passage across the Atlantic, which was 50 days. Getting but to New York from Gibraltar was the longest passage of the trip. I had my longest flat calm, which was a week straight without a breath of wind. I had my biggest storm ever, which was, I don't know. What I know is that when I was in the troughs of the waves, they towered over the mast, which was 30 feet high. They were huge waves. And I was going downwind at least, so it was making miles in the right direction. This is my 21st birthday meal. That's why this unfocused picture ends up in every slideshow. Got close to New York, and a gale came in just as I was about to make landfall, and I had to take the sails down. And Cruising World, who'd been publishing the articles all along the way and knew I was coming in, they were like, "Oh, no, you gotta." They came out, they met me as I was coming close to New York Harbor, and when I said I wasn't going to be able to sail in, they're like, "No, you got to get in there because we have a reception planned." So they sent the Coast Guard boat to come out and get me, and the boat first had to save them because their instrument panel caught on fire, and then they came and got me and pulled me into Sandy Hook in New Jersey, and this is one of the first things I saw, which was funny because Cruising World had also given me this thing that told them where I was, which is how they knew when I was getting close to land. It didn't tell me where I was, it told them. And a couple times it was solar powered, so sail bag covered it, and they didn't know where I was at some point. And so the New York Post decided I was lost at sea in shark infested waters. Also, the editor of Cruising World had met with me in Gibraltar, so I had with her gone over all the questions that people were going to ask me, and we reviewed the answers so that I wasn't going to just tell everybody, "Oh, it was good." Like when I left, all I could say was, "Why not?" Now I had to say why, and they had to be like paragraphs, not just monosyllabic answers, which is my tendency. And so I had those 50 days to look at those questions and answers, and so I survived the return, and it was weeks of talking to people, telling the stories, figuring out the story, really. I'd been living it. Now I had the story to tell. And the next year is when my dad, he thought I could do anything. Now while I was crossing the Atlantic, he set up the sponsorship for me to do the Iditarod sled dog race that winter, which didn't happen. So what happened, though, is I went and lived in Newport with the editor from Cruising World. I sat down and I relived this story and spent a year taking all the writing, all my logbook entries, the letters I'd written, and finding the story, what the beginning, middle, and end really was of this whole experience, along with the family history that drove me to do this, the family history that made me the person who ended up doing this. And this book has followed me through life now. People still read it, people still write to me. And if I hadn't have written it, I wouldn't remember half the stuff I remember now because of it. And I went on to school after that, and I wrote in order to document this trip in return for credit, I had to read about experiential education. And you can't, I couldn't get credit for having had this experience without talking about the experience and why I thought I should deserve the credit. You have to reflect on it, and you have to write about it to really realize what you've learned. And it turned out I learned a lot. But I think this picture is funny because in all the other ones, it's so hot sailing around the world in the tropics. And one of my last trips on Varuna was up the East River to City Island, and it was freezing. And that's one of the first times I realized I don't like sailing in the cold, actually, at all. But the last trip we did on Varuna was with my siblings when she was up in, we brought her up to Newport, and we took her out, and we just spread my mother's ashes out in Narragansett Bay. And then I sold her and continued on. Olivier and I got married, and I paid my father back for the trip, got that book done, and got my captain's license, and started working with, then I had kids and started working with this other lady who ran a sailing school for women. And that was a whole new experience. Here I was, like, I'd been this big sailor, but I'd never taught sailing. I had to learn how to teach it. I had all these stories, but I wasn't like, I hadn't learned how to teach. And I was teaching all these people who were very accomplished women of their own. And that inspired me to go back to school. I did go back and I got my BA, and then I got my MFA after that in creative writing. But while I had the kids, and we moved up to Vermont where we built our own house, and the kids never got on a boat. Olivier would go off doing deliveries. I would go off and do my sailing trips with Women for Sail and the other, whatever else I was doing sailing for. And those boys, they'd either be home with me or Olivier while either one of us went off. And same after we got divorced. And it was when they were, this is my house that we built, and this was my life for years. I'd come back from the sea to the chickens, to the house, to the gardens, and this is where the boys stayed. Here's Jill, with whom I did all these sailing trips. She was a great teacher for me too.
Yeah.
And these are
take a pause here, if we don't mind. We got to run another commercial.
Okay, good place.
Yeah, this seems like a pretty good place because we're going to start talking about your boys in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
It's a 127-mile overnight race from Annapolis, Maryland to Norfolk, Virginia. It's a celebration of a race to market from an age that has passed into history, a time when the Chesapeake Bay hosted passenger steamers and was peppered with working boats and pleasure craft, all under sail. This is an invitation to take part in a celebration, an invitation to get out on the bay, strut your stuff, spend time with friends, and put some wind in the sails of your beautiful boat. This is an invitation to join the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. After more than 35 years, the Schooner Race has decided to add an invitational class for non-schooner boats that would like to join us in the fun. Now, whether you have a schooner or classic vessel that harkens back to that age of sail, we're inviting you to join us. This race runs the length of the bay, and participants encounter all sorts of different conditions. It's challenging, and it's a great deal of fun. From the parade of sail in Baltimore's Inner Harbor to the crack of the starting cannon off Annapolis to the early morning finish at Thimble Shoal Light at the mouth of Hampton Roads, this is a race designed to celebrate your rig, whether classic yawl, ketch, sloop, workboat, or schooner. It's a chance to test your skills and enjoy the camaraderie of new friends and old. It's a chance to be part of something big and something meaningful. As an invitational class, the criteria are simple. If you have a vessel, modern or not, which is reminiscent of the age of schooners, you are welcome to join us. In addition, if you or your organization have a mission compatible with ours, promoting awareness of the Chesapeake Bay's heritage and ecology, and or preserving these historic vessels, you'd be welcome to join us too. Applications will be considered by our race committee, and if they feel that your boat or organization would fit our parameters, you're in for a wonderful experience. Join us. Let's get your boat on the line. Or, if you know of anyone else who might fit our criteria, send this over to them. Let's keep this great event alive, and let's give back to those who live along our shores. Join us for the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. It's a ride to remember.
Love is holy.
To find out more about the race and our mission of supporting not-for-profit organizations on and around the Bay, please visit us at gcbsr.org.
Life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like I've been walking on air. Left all my worries and cares. I've got no burdens around you. I don't care who knows I love you. 'Cause I've been so lost without you. And in my darkest times, you got me feeling like
And that race is coming up in just about 3 weeks. And we do have a few more spaces if you'd like to join us. Love to see you. We are back with my friend Tania Aebi, and she's picking it up where she left it off. Take it away, Tania.
All right, with Jill, and who I started doing the Women for Sailing trips. And because of these trips and the trips I started doing, I started working also for a magazine, Latitudes and Attitudes. I got a column with them, and 99, I did that column now for like 23 years. First, it was every month, then it was every couple months, and then quarter. It went through different things, but I had to come up every couple months with something to write about. So these trips always gave me some kind of material. We went everywhere around the world, anywhere where there's a charter base. Obviously, this is Greece. Sometimes I take my sextant to show people how to use it. Everybody'd want to try it once, and then that was it. I stopped carrying that thing with me and check bags. And then when I went to school and did the MFA program, everybody was talking about publishing. So I took a bunch of the articles I'd been writing over the years and turned it into a compilation of essays here. I did not write a book about my trip with the boys, which is about to come up. So here I went to school, I kept going sailing, and it was when the boys were they were about to go in, well, they were in like 10th and 7th grade when I decided I needed to do something with them before they were gone. All of a sudden, these kids were going to be heading off to college soon, and they'd never been on a boat. And this is us hiking in the mountains, and they always heard the stories about the sailing. I was always bringing them home. I was always bringing them home the T-shirts, but they'd never been on a boat, except for this one, which we had in the driveway. We rigged it there. We took it out on the lake a couple times, but not the same. I ended up taking them out of a school for a year. I found a boat in St. Martin. It was a de Villiers 36, a steel boat. And again, the hardest part of any cruise, I think, any sailing dream, is making it happen, is making that decision about to do it, and then all the work that goes into making it happen. It was huge. It was just another really big deal for me, was to get this boat ready and equipped, to buy it, get it ready and equipped, and to take my two boys. And now I had precious cargo. It was so different to be on a boat with my sons rather than just me. I had to really I wanted them to be safe. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted them to love it. And I wanted to have fun with them instead of worrying all the time. But, the other thing I always say is, if you're a worrier, it's the best thing to do is get a boat, because it'll give you nothing but stuff to worry about. And so I sailed her with my one son and our neighbor's son. The other son was busy. We sailed her from St. Martin down to Curacao, where I left her for hurricane season. And then we picked up. And right before I left for Curacao to get her with the boys, Tarzoon died, 21 years old. So it was perfect timing that he had been there all those years. And then right before I started my next big sail, he died, living a good life. Anyway, these are the pictures of getting ready to go on a boat. I also was writing now for Boat US, Cruising World, and for Latitudes and Attitudes. So I was just between getting a boat ready, I was writing up a storm, and going down to the boat. Of course, you always arrive in the middle of the night on a boat when you go anywhere with all the stuff, and it's hot and mosquitoes, and it was very overwhelming at times getting everything together. I went down there ahead of the boys, and then my dad came down with them eventually when I was ready, and we sailed from Curacao to Panama via Cartagena in Colombia with my dad. He came with me for those first 2 passages with us. But I mean, he was like one of the kids at this point. He would sit around and say, "Oh, I've had 3 boats and I never did something like this." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, this is my boat now." But anyway, just figuring out everything was was a lot of work, and the boys arrived. They didn't know what they were getting into. They were a little bewildered in the beginning. And my younger son, Sam, he was saying, I could have a really great adventure if I stayed home and took care of the house while you guys went on the boat. And Nicholas, he loved it. He just got on the boat and he's like, I can't believe we're going to be doing this for a year. I got all the homeschooling stuff ready for them. And by the time they got there, Shangri-La was her name. She was very shipshape. She was a great boat, too. I did find a good, safe boat. And it was a good thing to get a steel boat, although it was a lot of extra work keeping the rust at bay. I was out there painting all the time. And this is just a classic picture. There I am trying to figure out how to get online to get another weather report, and Nicholas is behind me snoring. And the boys were very good. Or with my dad, they'd be sitting in a restaurant playing cards endlessly while I'm stuck in front of the engine here again. This engine was another one, but by now I was pretty good at it. But I kept on top of it. But God, I did not want to have an engine failure ever again. And there they are, the boys out in the cockpit, waiting for me to make dinner. And learning how to sail. So I sailed with them from Curacao, Cartagena, Panama. We did not stop at the Galapagos Islands. We did it straight through to the Marquesas. And that was really what I wanted most of all with my kids, was to have an ocean passage, to have that experience for them and for me with them. And it was lovely. We had a beautiful crossing. And the boat was really well. And they just plugged away at their homeschooling. I had gotten all their stuff together, and they were done by February. And there's Sammy sleeping across from me. One of the things he kept saying was he just he missed being able to slide into dry sheets. Everything's always damp on a boat. And his thing was, I miss my slippery sheets. There was an adjustment period, and this is all the food we had to our lockers filled up to get across. There was adjustment, but those boys both ended up loving this trip. When we got to Tahiti, this was the I forgot to take a picture as we crossed the equator. I caught it a little bit late, but anyway, we did the crossing, and they learned. They learned about. I used to fantasize about being on boats with people who could take care of things while I stayed in bed. And they actually turned out to be those people. Like, they could go out and do sail changes while I stayed down. Well, I didn't stay in bed, but I cooked or something instead. And they'd go out and do the sail changes. They learned how to do the sextant out there too. I made sure that was part of our experience. Nicholas, his favorite thing was just being able to read all the time. Sam was the one that would do the homeschooling, and he raised the bar always. Nicholas always had to try and keep up with him. Sam was always forging ahead, and Nicholas was coming behind him so that he wouldn't be behind. When Sam was done with the school year, he wasn't going to be left too far behind. Doing the sail changes and getting to Marquesas. We sailed around the Marquesas. We sailed around the Tuamotus, which were some of my best memories too of the South Pacific. And we hiked there like we did in Vermont a lot. We would hike in the islands there. And yeah, having fun on the boat in the Tuamotus. The one thing, also another thing, is in the intervening years, the oceans had gotten a lot more crowded. That's what the GPS and all modern communications had done. All the harbors that I'd gone to with Varuna, where there were only a couple boats, are now like the nice, safe harbors had turned into marinas with waiting lists. But I did this trip in hurricane season. I used it. The hurricane season isn't so bad when you are east of the French Polynesia, and I kept a pretty good watch on the weather. So when we got to these places, we were alone because people go in packs when it's the right season. So that's actually my little life hack or sailing hack. Go when it's not the right season. Just pay attention to the weather. The boys were underwater a lot too. They got their diving permits in the Tuamotus. And a lot of these pictures are the pictures on the walls of our house now. And when it was time for me to hand the boat over to Olivier, he got a turnkey operation. He met us in Tahiti, and the boys knew how to sail. They were finished with their homeschooling year. I'd worked out all the quirks on Shangri-La. My niece and nephew, Sabine and Alexander, came to with their parents, came to sail with us for a week or two before we did the changeover. Here we are in Moorea. It was just French Polynesia was one of my favorite places, and it was really nice to get back there with the boys. And I finished up my trip there by I planned one of my charters with the women's sailing school. So I had 5 boats waiting for us to sail around the islands with once I handed this one over to Olivier and the boys. So this was right as I was leaving them to go back to Vermont. I did my trip with the women's sailing school, and then went back to Vermont and finished a whole bunch of projects on the house, because when you build your own house and you move in before it's finished, it doesn't get finished while you're living in there. So once the boys were gone for 4 months, I was able to do all the finishing up there while they went and had fun with Olivier. This is another picture hanging in the house now. And because of this trip, Sam became an avid fisherman. He still does that all the time. And both boys went to Maine Maritime after this. They both became marine systems engineers to work on the big ships. A big takeaway for them was the resourcefulness of that it is necessary to be on a boat, and all the people they met, and they loved it and wanted to go and continue the life at sea. But I was like, why don't you do it on the big boats where you might actually make a living? So they did that. And the older son now has I sold the boat again at the end of this trip, and the older son just has 2 children now, so he's figuring out what he's going to do because he doesn't want to keep shipping out. And the younger son got a job ashore just last week. But I went back to doing my sailing trips with people and got those kids through high school and off to college. Sam, I love this picture. I stuck it in here because Sam got he did a trip from Ireland to Iceland and Greenland and back, and had this beautiful picture for me to show people in a glacier. He didn't mind sailing in cold weather. And then the last boat I had was, again, I spent those 2.5 years on Varuna dreaming about the Contessa 32. And somehow I had to, live the dream. And I got a Contessa 32. I got a very good deal on her in St. Martin and brought her up. It was my last solo sail. I brought her up from St. Martin up to Bermuda and then up to Maine, where I thought I'd be near the kids in school. But I realized then that you only sail in Maine in the summer, and the boys aren't in school in the summer. So, but it was beautiful to sail the East Coast. That was something I'd always wanted to do, was sail in my backyard and be able to bring a vacuum cleaner to the boat with my car. Game changer, being able to finally clean with my nice little vacuum cleaner everything. That boat was so spick and span. And that was my last boat. I had a plan with her to go across the Atlantic and do like the Great Circle. I wanted to do another, I was turning 50. I thought that would be maybe my last big sailing adventure on my own. But then my dad he had dementia, and I ended up having to stay home. Life happens. And that's the thing about leaving when I was 18. I was able to go off on a sail and have that great adventure before I got anchored by life and all the responsibilities. It just gets so much harder to do anything. So I thought the boys were in college. I was on my own. I could get a boat. And then my dad got dementia and we went full circle. He gave so much to me in the beginning. It was my time to give him back. And I took care of him for the last 6 years. He died 2 years ago. And in the meantime, I also got these 2 little guys. And that's, I think, the last picture, because that is my life now, is I'm home so I can be here with the kids. And I still go sailing. I'm leaving in a couple of weeks to bring a boat from Mallorca to the Canary Islands. So I have my deliveries, and I don't do the column anymore. So that stress is done. I don't have to keep making every experience into a story anymore. I'm going to be 60 next year too. The years have zoomed by, and that's it.
You don't have
That's
to tell
the
them
last
all
picture. And I've a 7:57. I couldn't do it in 45 minutes. It's those ads.
Love it. Hit your share button, and we will have a quick conversation. Tania, that was just wonderful. And of course, you've done a lot of things and gone a lot of places, but I think the point that that really we all need to take away is do it now because you don't know.
Just do it. That's
Just
what you want to do. Just do it. And it's not going to be easy all the time. There's going to be hard moments for sure and scary, but nothing lasts forever.
That's what Lynn Party used to say. Just get out there and do it.
Mhm.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a chat window running, and we also have a Q&A window running. And we're going to drop over to take a look at some of those. If you have any questions or comments, type them in, and we'll go through them here real quick. Rebecca says we sailed the Marquesas and Tuamotus, and they were beautiful. I'll bet. And thank you from Priscilla Travis, a good friend of mine. Thanks so much for sharing your life in person and in your books and articles. And on my end, we reread Maiden Voyage out loud to my wife. That's great fun. We have over here in the questions and answers, wonderful presentation. Thank you. We loved all the photos. How did you take the photos? This was most likely before selfies or cell phones.
You know, any of the pictures that were taken of me were probably taken all around the same time, and I could pepper them in through slideshows. And yeah, no, I didn't. I was terrible at taking pictures also. I could have had so many more. It's not my thing. I don't do the selfie thing really either. It's the last. I always think of it too late. I missed a lot of photo opportunities because I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I'm not thinking of photographing it. So
Steve Ward says, where was your sailing school? Thanks, and what a great story and experience.
The sailing school is at my desk, and it was planning trips. We would charter boats in different places, anywhere where there was a charter base. We went so many places around the world, and we would just charter the boat, take people out for a week. And then I also did these offshore sailing trips with a friend who runs Offshore Passage Opportunities. I would bring every year. I started doing it round trip, and then I started just doing one-way trips back and forth to Bermuda. Did that trip many times on a beautiful and fast Swan 48. Very nice.
That's a great boat.
Very nice.
Here's somebody you may know, Cheryl Duvall. Thank you,
yes,
Tanya.
she came on the boat with me. I saw her name just pop up.
One of my best sailing memories is sailing with you in 2019 from Bermuda to Huntington, New York. Great to hear about your sons and grandkids now. Pretty fun. Greg Bauer says, I loved your first book. What was the most important lesson you learned from your trip that you can look back on now?
I've said it. I'm going to say it again. Just do it. It's nothing lasts forever. That was the most important thing. It's like the days, everything passes. Nothing lasts forever. Neither the bad moments nor the good times. So you just got to do what you got to do while you can. The dithering, it can happen, but don't let it last too long.
I think that's great advice. And Steve Marinelli writes, well, what was your favorite meal to eat on passage? Did you have a fallback meal?
I did. I actually, cabbage, carrots, potatoes, onions, leeks, beets, all the root vegetables, the stuff that could last a long time. I love chopping off big chunks, putting them in the pressure cooker, covering them in butter, and just eating a huge pot of vegetables. Loved it. Probably eating all that butter. Now I've got high cholesterol.
Nice. Susan Orr says, what a brave, adventurous woman you are. Wonderful presentation. Your pics are great. Can't wait to read Maiden Voyage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here's one from Pam and Nat Benjamin, good friends of ours. Amazing stories, Tania. Thank you so much. What time of year did you do the transatlantic?
Which one?
Yeah, there you go. I have a feeling you did say that. It was
transatlantic, the last one with the big storms. That was October to November. I had my 21st birthday out there.
There's one. Barb White says, love to hear you're still sailing solo. What an inspiration. Thank you. And Dmitry Selenov says, Tania, I read your first book years ago, recommended it to a number of people, and then I read your second book too. You got a fan. I need to go now. We'll watch the recording later. Thank you for sharing stories. Well, I think that's pretty sweet. And here's somebody. Gary says he's gonna read it again. Read your book again after 37 years.
I know.
No, isn't that great?
37 years. It's crazy.
It is just hard to believe. Here's one. Louise says, I read Maiden Voyage sitting on my own Contessa 26. Any advice on getting your captain's license?
Ugh. This too shall pass. Again, it's bureaucracy, it's paperwork, it's patience with that, and just getting all the numbers and the dates and the times and everything together, and then studying for the test.
Oh,
Actually, advice: if you really want to get a captain's license or something that's going to work around the world, get your RYA. You can't charter a boat. They don't recognize in the Mediterranean the U.S. Coast Guard captain's license. They want like your ASA sailing certification. You have to have something else.
isn't that something? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I would do it again now, I mean, I've got the ASA now and I've got the captain's. I'm not going to do it, but I would do the RYA one.
I think that's great advice.
Mm.
Pam Benjamin writes, come visit us in Martha's Vineyard. We have an awesome sailing community.
I do need to get to Martha's Vineyard one day.
It's a pretty special place.
Mm.
Well, I'm afraid, my friends, we've kind of run out of time. And Tania, this was just so wonderful. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be able to put all these pictures together, and the stories aren't stories until you figure out what the story is.
And that's really true. I think that's great advice. All right, my friends, thank you for joining us. Just a couple of notes here. We have got Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race coming up in mid-October, and after that, the Sultana downrigging. So if you can come join us, we'd love to see you. This interview will be online, recorded, and probably up in about 48 hours after I get back to my editing booth and ready to roll. And with that, Tania Aebi, thank you so much for the time you spent with us.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
Very, very special. All right, my friends, we will see you next time.